Welcome to my kitchen. This is the fourth episode in the Land Institute's Perennial Practice video series, and I'm Aubrey Streit Krug. So far, we've experienced a prairie ecosystem and research agroecosystem, and considered plants and roots and soils. I want to point out how people are involved in each one of these places and practices. Whether we're recognizing dynamic, ongoing indigenous community relationships with food plants, or learning from the labor of farm workers and researchers in fields and labs, or seeking to make it possible for future generations to feed themselves, people are a part of agriculture. And it's people who need diverse perennial agroecosystems for the sake of both human communities and the more than human ecosphere we are embedded within. The concepts of perenniality and diversity that we have been talking about do exist in food systems. For example, in my kitchen garden and neighborhood are perennial fruits, vegetables, and herbs. It's spring here in Kansas, so I'm tending my strawberries, rhubarb, and mint. You might be eating asparagus or some delicious ramps or nettles. I recommend nettle pesto. A few days ago, I delighted in the chokecherries and buffalo currants blooming in a nearby prairie pasture, and I convinced my parents to plant a pawpaw tree. Berries and fruit and nut trees are all excellent examples of perennials many people know and love to eat. But perennial grains, like the kernza harvested from intermediate wheatgrass, have never existed in food systems before. And our domestic spaces can be important places to reflect on why perennial grain domestication matters. To start our practice today, I invite you to consider some of the staples in your cupboard. Many of these staple foods are, broadly speaking, grains. By grains, I mean the hard, dry, edible seeds, richly nutritious with carbohydrates, oils, or proteins that are produced by plants and threshed free from them. We are most familiar with cereal grains, or grains from the grass family. But this broad definition of grains also includes legumes and oilseeds. In my cupboard, there's some staple grains including rice. We have wheat pasta. We have some steel-cut oats here. We also have, of course, popcorn. And then legumes include some black beans. We have red lentils. We have chickpeas, which are all legumes. And then for oil seeds, we have, of course, canola oil and tahini, sesame, which are oil seeds. So grains produce the majority of the calories that sustain people around the world and occupy the majority of the world's croplands. And part of the critical legacy of domestication is that all these pantry staple grains are annuals. The Land Institute seeks to make perennial grains, including cereal grains, oilseeds, and legumes, to grow in diverse agroecosystems. So again, in other words, we're doing this in an effort to feed people. Many people have learned to ask where their food comes from. Answers to this question are often given in simple terms of proximity or distance. We talk about an origin point and a destination, a single trip that a food item takes from there, where it's grown or processed, to here, where it's cooked or eaten. That's a great practice and one worth repeating. So as you look in your cupboard or refrigerator, you can ask yourself, where does my food come from? The truth is, unless I am picking a strawberry in my backyard, there's rarely a simple single story about how food comes from there to here in our kitchens. And I think this initial practice can stretch even more, just like we might stretch bread or pizza dough in the process of kneading it. Where does your food come from, but also with who and when and why over time and space? At meal times with family members and friends and roommates, we might practice contemplating how this came to be food at all, over a process involving the generations before us and the ones who could be after us. Beyond the story of origin to destination and one season or lifetime, we might dig deeper. We might contemplate what we choose to do with the food calories we consume beyond simply survive. Who has food and who needs it, and what is our role in pursuing sustainability and justice? Where does our food come from and where is it going? For me, this is what it means to try to understand food systems. Food is social and biophysical. Food is about people in relationship to plants and animals as well as other people. about human cultural relationships and our energetic relationships to land, air, and water. In English, we often talk about putting food on the table, but arguably food is not only what's on the table. The people around the table, the people in the fields and stores, the people scraping the plates and doing the dishes, the people who gave us the table and the people who we hope will inherit it, we can give perennial thanks for them too. I love how U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo speaks to the power of food and the kitchen table. The poem is Perhaps the World Ends Here, and it's the last poem in her 1994 book, The Woman Who Fell from the Sky. The poem opens, quote, "The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on." Then the poem describes everything that happens at the table, all the lively and wonderful and terrible activities of human community. Then the poem closes, quote, "At this table we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite." Thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you next week.